Welcome back to Spa, where the sun has come out for the second race of the weekend for the GT Cup Championship in front of a sizable and knowledgeable local crowd. The grid for this one set by the second quickest time from qualifying, but it's still Alex Martin on pole position with Gary Eastwood alongside him. Jim Geddy in the Ferrari for the first time this weekend lines up third with race one winner Andy Ruin alongside him. Keith Webster there in 12th position, sandwiched by the KTM crossbows of Benjamin Harvey and Peter Belshaw. Marco pulling some way down in 14th, with Tom Andrew leading the Group 3 runners once more from Dan Norris-Jones and David Bottrell. Well, the field, as ever, in the GT Cup Championship, having a rolling start. So the pace car about to pull in. Then we'll be going racing here for the second time at Spa as the sun beams down on this wonderful circuit. It's Alex Martin, it's the inside of the yellow Porsche, who leads away, and this time he gets a better start and moves straight across to take the dry runs. They head up towards La Source for the first time as Jim Geddy looks to the inside. It's going to get very congested as they go through the Source, but it's Alex Martin who holds on around the outside, so he appears to have the lead as they stream down towards Eau Rouge for the first time. Several drivers taking a slightly wider line and go in car with Jim Geddy, as we can see Alex Martin plunging down the hill, and then they climb up through Eau Rouge. Martin just kissing the curb as he moves up towards the crest and then onto the Kemmel Straight for the first time. Everybody safely through as already the field beginning to stream around this circuit. It's Martin stretching his legs in these early stages and trying to build that advantage over Jim Geddy, who I'm sure is learning a little bit about what the Ferrari does, having been so accustomed to racing in Porsches previously. There is the race one winner Andy Ruin as he tries to make his way up into the leading positions, but he spins, he goes off, he put two wheels on the grass and the traction just went away from him. So Andy Ruin, well, that is a disastrous start to the second race of the weekend for him. He's got to wait for the entire field to go through before he can recover. So he is going to have a lot of work to do if he's going to pick his way back up the order. Well, at least he recovers with no damage except to pride, as at the head of the field, Alex Martin and Jim Geddy are breaking away from the rest, who are currently being headed by Gary Eastwood, although he has got Danny Winstanley and Colin Mole right on his tail as they make their way to this sequence of double left-handers which don't have any name. The drivers absolutely love them as corners, but bizarrely, unlike every other corner on the Spa circuit, they don't have a name, but they do produce some spectacular action. As you can see, different battles already beginning to form amongst the sizable GT Cup Championship grid. David Bottrell just heading Dan Norris-Jones as they are fighting for Group 3 honours. Well, Martin and Geddy now really stretching away from Gary Eastwood, who's busy having to defend from Danny Winstanley. Winstanley, a feisty young competitor, always very entertaining to watch on track. They make their way towards the bus stop chicane, where this time the track is dry, so is anybody brave enough to launch themselves up the inside? No, not this time round. I guess a couple of weeks preceding this meeting, they'll have all seen Sebastian Vettel drop-kicking Jenson Button out of the Belgian Grand Prix and don't want to do the same today in the GT Cup Championship. So on towards La Source once more goes Gary Eastwood. Danny Winstanley settled in right behind him as Ian Hartley looks to the inside of Colin Mole. Mole shutting the door there, a bit of a jam there for Hartley really, because there wasn't a Ferrari's width for him to go through, so he has to settle in behind the KTM crossbow, though he can't get too relaxed because he's got Michael Saunders in the TVR and also Keith Webster as well, the BMW homing in on his tail. Through Eau Rouge they all go as they set off in pursuit of that man ahead of the screen, Alex Martin, who has had a superb 2010 season. And this camera shot, you can see the whites of the driver's eyes as they turn into their absolutely fantastic shot as Danny Winstanley looks to the outside of Gary Eastwood, and Gary, having none of that, he just firmly plants the Ferrari on the inside line and says to Danny, well, if you want to get past me, you're going to have to drive around me, but there's not enough room to do that. So Danny Winstanley, for the moment, in fourth position. I think Jim Geddy in the Ferrari trying to chase down Alex Martin. I feel that might be somewhat of a forlorn pursuit, but at least he doesn't have to worry too much about Gary Eastwood, because Gary is defending, although he's not defending too vigorously from Danny Winstanley. He's letting Danny do all the hard work and try and find his way through. Gary Eastwood just sticking to his line, although Danny probably getting the hurry up because Michael Saunders in the TVR is also beginning to close in on his tail. So Martin, the race leader, from Jim Geddy in the white Ferrari in second place. And then Danny Winstanley in third, so the pressure is finally paid. He picks his way past Gary Eastwood, so Danny Winstanley finally finds his way through up into third position. Now, what has Gary Eastwood got by way of response? Well, he looks to the inside of Danny Winstanley to the bus stop. He has a big, long look to the inside, Danny Winstanley to the bus stop. Winstanley chops across Gary Eastwood's bows. I'm not sure that Danny really knew too much about the Ferrari being there, because he very assertively turned across and claimed his line. And it means that Gary Eastwood also has lost some momentum, has now got Michael Saunders in the TVR homing in his tail. Saunders, who last time out at Brands Hatch had a superb race weekend in terms of pace, but it just didn't quite translate into the results as they make their way down towards Eau Rouge. Here is the battle for the lead of Group 3, and it's David Bottrell who is leading the way from Tom Andrew and Dan Norris-Jones. We're used to seeing Andrew and Norris-Jones fighting out for the Group 3 honours. It's wonderful to see David Bottrell there showing them the way at the moment in the Porsche Multimarque Racing at its very, very best. We've got the Porsche of David Bottrell, the KTM Crossbow of Tom Andrew, and the Lotus of Dan Norris-Jones as well. Wonderful scrap this as they make their way through La Source, accelerate on towards Eau Rouge. This is where the big Porsche can stretch its legs over the KTM and the Lotus, but then you'd expect to see the cars that are a little bit lighter, a little bit more nimble, possibly in the handling department, gain some ground through Eau Rouge, and that's exactly what Tom Andrew does. You can see him begin to reel in the Porsche of David Bottrell once more. Well, Michael Saunders in pursuit of Gary Eastwood, and still yet to try and prize the opening from Gary Eastwood, who has established himself as a very difficult man to pass during 2010. Well, David Bottrell still keeping Tom Andrew at bay, and the Porsche doing a fine job. The KTM Crossbow, Tom Andrew, he just can't pick his way past David Bottrell, as Danny Winstanley has homed in on the tail of Jim Geddy. Now, what can Danny Winstanley do about picking his way past the Ferrari? Well, Geddy holding the inside line as they move towards the bus stop chicane. You can see Winstanley bobbing and weaving behind him, trying to force possibly an error from Jim Geddy. Well, Geddy runs a little bit wide here. Now, can Winstanley capitalise on the switchback? We're going to have a drag race up towards La Source, so it's going to be the Ferrari of Jim Geddy. Geddy rarely seen racing the Ferrari, but he's really acquitting himself well this weekend. And the Porsche of Danny Winstanley. Winstanley to the outside, looks to have the advantage on Jim Geddy, or does he as they go into La Source? No, it's Geddy who turns through and holds on to that second position. So Danny Winstanley, well, his attempt to get through somewhat thwarted, so he remains in third. David Bottrell continues to lead Group 3. Brilliant stuff this from David, as Dan Norris-Jones, probably the wisest head of all in terms of this particular battle, because he's just sitting and watching Tom Andrew trying to pick his way past David Bottrell. He's got a wonderful view of this battle, and well, I'm sure as the race progresses, do what he can to see if he can elevate himself up past Tom Andrew and David Bottrell. But Bottrell, again, as they make their way past the teams on the pit wall, stretching his legs over Tom Andrew. Well, here comes Jim Geddy, and then we've got a big gap. And then we've had a bit of a sort out, because it's Gary Eastwood who comes through next in third position, and Danny Winstanley and Michael Saunders are at the rear of that queue. And I just wonder if they've had a moment somewhere, because they were challenging Jim Geddy, and now they're right at the back of this 6-car train. So it's now Gary Eastwood ahead of Ian Hartley, and then the Group 2 battle is as close as you like between Keith Webster and Colin Mole. Mole in the orange KTM Crossbow, Webster in the orange BMW. Again, it's going to be drag race time towards La Source, but it's Keith Webster who came into this weekend as the championship leader, who has got Colin Mole looking really every which way. Mole dives to the inside as they go to La Source. Is he going to go through? Yes, he does. So Colin Mole gaining the lead of Group 2, but how long will it last? Because they are side by side as they make their way down towards Eau Rouge, and Keith Webster trying to squeeze his way through. They're going to have to pull in the pit boards, the pit wall, because they were running as close as you like to the pit wall, but it's Colin Mole who holds on with the lead of Group 2 from Keith Webster. Well, there is Jim Geddy in the white Ferrari. Then we've got the black Ferrari of Gary Eastwood. We've got Colin Mole who is defending. You can see him to the left of the shot. We'll see whether it's been enough to keep Keith Webster behind him as Ian Hartley turns in, and then it is Keith Webster. So Webster retakes the lead of Group 2 from Colin Mole. Ding-dong battle this one. And again, the various merits of the KTM Crossbow and the BMW coming to the fore around this Spa circuit. Well, it's Tom Andrew who has finally found his way past David Bottrell, who leads Group 3 from Dan Norris-Jones as the race leader, and Group 1 leader Alex Martin exits the bus stop chicane for the final time, and the checker flag goes out and Martin takes the win here at Spa. An emphatic drive from Alex Martin. He'll be absolutely delighted with that. So the final classification after a very busy race from the GT Cup Championship sees Alex Martin taking the win from Jim Geddy and Keith Webster taking third overall and Group 2 honours. So Group 1 it was Alex Martin from Jim Geddy and Michael Saunders. Great to see him on the podium in the TVR. Group 2, Keith Webster from Colin Mole and Marco Pullen. Some great dicing there. And the wonderful Group 3 battle was resolved in favour of Tom Andrew from Dan Norris-Jones and David Bottrell.
I got my head down for the first few laps, made sure I had a nice lead and just had to concentrate. You know, anything can change.
I got to the front and then I started catching the Class 1 cars. I was so much quicker than them through the corners and especially the faster corners. So that really gave me the confidence to have a go and to put plenty of cars between myself and the next Class 2 car.
I actually got hit by a flying bit of metal down the start-finish straight, which actually smashed my rev counter and my fuel gauge. So I was driving blind for the rest of the race, but I had a good race, kind of good battle with the other Group 3 cars, and hopefully we brought it down for the win.
Well, as we leave Spa, the championship standings are as follows, with in Group 1 Alex Martin leading the way, still just from Danny Winstanley and Gary Eastwood. Group 2 it's Marco Pullen, who has a very slender advantage over Keith Webster and Colin and Sam Mole. And then in Group 3, Tom Andrew beginning to build that advantage over Dan Norris-Jones and David Bottrell. In terms of the overall championship standings, it's Marco Pullen who has just 7 points over Keith Webster, with Alex Martin very much in contention as well. It's been a great weekend at Spa. With just one round to go at Silverstone, there's still everything to play for in the championship battle. We'll see you there.